And we're back. You're listening to the Talkin' Boxing with Billy C show. Glad you could join. A special shout out to ESPN New Hampshire. Glad you guys are listening to us today. And don't forget about Sal's Neighborhood Pizzeria and Restaurant. If you're heading south, like I'm going to be doing in a few days, make sure you swing by Sal's Place in beautiful St. Simons Island, Georgia, for some of the best pizza in the world, on the planet, in the world. Give them a call, 912-268-2328, 912-268-2328, or check out his website, www.salsneighborhoodpizzeria.com, for all the information there. And, it's really good. Bring a copy of my book to Sal's. That's right. You can get a copy of my book, Tom Molyneux, From Bondage to Baddest Man on the Planet, at Amazon.com or BarnesandNoble.com. I can't help it. I got to promote the book, man. Get a copy or 2 or 10. Anyway, each week we do, this.
Blast from the past.
Top-ranking Joe Louis is the leading contender.
That's not an instant. I must be the greatest.
Joe Frazier with a left hook. Good right hand thrown by Foreman that time. Look at that left hook.
Belt that goes to Ray Mancini.
It's Blast from the Past on Talkin' Boxing.
And this week's Blast from the Past, which is being sponsored by KOFantasyBoxing.com. Check it out, www.KOFantasyBoxing.com. Features a not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, but 5-time world title challenger. Always coming up short, but facing the best of the best of the best, Yaqui Lopez. And joining me right now to tell us all about Yaqui Lopez is my man, Alex Pierpaoli. What's up, brother?
Hey, Billy. Good evening. How are you?
Oh, not too bad, not too bad. We might as well get it out right now. This guy fought everybody. I mean, there's no way around it with him, right?
Yeah, that's true. He certainly did, and he had the misfortune to come around when the light heavyweight division had a lot of very tough guys, and because it's kind of a sad distinction to be 0-5 in world title fights, and I count 0-8 in title fights his whole life, because I think even a couple of regional titles he lost.
Did he ever win any title? No.
Not that I see, no.
Yeah, he even lost the California state title, right?
Yeah, even NABF titles.
Yeah.
That's a bummer.
Yeah.
But yeah, Alvaro, Yaqui Lopez.
No, he did win. I don't mean to interrupt you, but he did win. I was going to say, the poor guy never won a title, but he did win the California State light heavyweight title and made a couple of defenses early in his career. But anyway, go ahead.
Okay, yeah, those don't show up, at least not that I see on BoxRec or Cyber Boxing Zone. But even the NABF and NABH titles, those were the regional ones that he did not. He lost in bids for those. Hello?
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, sorry.
No.
I just heard like a click or something.
I was choking, man. I hit the button and I was trying to cough without coming on air, and I think when I hit it, I was just breathing again, and you might have heard that. But anyway.
All right. Alvaro Lopez. His nickname was Yaqui, and it actually stuck almost as a first name. It's kind of interesting how that came around. We'll get to that in a second. He was born May 21st, 1951. He was 6 feet 2 inches tall. Light heavyweight is the division he boxed at, 175 pounds. He was born in Zacatecas, Mexico, and he was actually born very close. It's hard to, for some of the places I read, it said under, the building where he lived was part of a bullfight, a bull ring. And there was one day that, so I guess, you're around, living that close, you're around matadors a lot, that whole atmosphere. And one day he snuck up there when he was 12 years old, and there was a couple of bulls in the pen, and he wanted to try his hand at bullfighting. So he went out there, I guess, with a jacket, and this 12-year-old kid with a bull, and the bull got him. And what this might have been an interesting omen because his first real fight there with a bull, he gets bloodied. He took a horn right in the shin and spilled a lot of blood. Well, his whole career, he had a tendency to cut. Now, granted, not in the legs, but at one point in one of the fights I watched of his, Ferdy Pacheco referred to the scar tissue in his forehead as it looked like a World War I battlefield. But yeah, so I guess his mother wasn't too excited about his impromptu matador career. So soon after that incident, they moved away. They moved to Linden, California, which is real close to Stockton, and Stockton's where he fought out of.
That was a famous the bull arena that he lived under was a famous bullfighting arena. I'm pretty sure I remember seeing a movie. I forget the name of it. It was about a specific bull, I think, and how the bull was raised and everything else. But the main fight, I believe, for this bull that they finally spared his life. He was like one of the only bulls that they spared the life because he gave the Mexican, one of the best bullfighters, the fight of his life, and they were going to kill him, and all the fans wanted them to spare the bull. They loved him so much, and they did, and I believe it was at the same place, Plaza de Torres San Pedro in Zacacarias, or however you say it. I'm pretty sure that was the same one. I got to look that up now that we mention that, but interesting. But you know what was interesting about this guy, real quick, as we talk about his younger life, is that he, as great as his pro career was, and all the fights that he had, I mean, 76 professional fights, and the guys that he fought, and the wars he was in, and coming up short, and et cetera, et cetera. Usually when you hear that, with the exception of way back, you hear of a pretty long and decorated amateur career. This guy had 16 amateur fights before he turned pro, with a very modest 13-3 record. I found that interesting.
Yeah, I think I think that's one of the things that we see a lot in Mexico and even in Southern California. If you're not a real amateur standout, like you have that idea of like Olympics, that why not just be a pro and start making some money, and that's definitely what he did. And he was a very exciting fighter. It's interesting, his style, even though he was pretty, well-schooled boxer, he loves the body, which is sort of the typical Mexican, the stereotype, which you see a lot of great Mexican body punchers. But he, for a guy who could box, he sure liked to slug and mix it up. But that was, his name he's named after the Yaqui Indian tribe, which were indigenous people in the area of the southwest U.S. and Sonora, Mexico. But the name he was not he's not related to them in any way. It was at an amateur competition where his father-in-law, or his would-be father-in-law at the time, became his trainer and mentor and promoter, manager, rather. And the dedication, this guy, he kept him his entire career, but he was also the one who named him. He was doing very well in an amateur competition, and there was people asking, who is he, what's his name, and they asked, is he Indian? And he said, yeah, he's Yaqui, because there were some Yaqui Indians there in the crowd, and they sort of adopted him right then, and the name stuck for his whole career.
That's wild. I wondered about his nickname, alias, his nickname Indian. But when you look at this guy's record, Alex, early in his career, they fed him some grizzled veteran fighters early on that he came up with W's against. guys like Ron Wilson, who had a lot of fights when he fought him, Andy Kendall, Bobby Raskin, and even Mike Quarry, one of the Quarry brothers. And that was early in his career. Then it's like the flip side. When you look at all his losses, and he had double-digit losses, but the names are unbelievable. Michael Spinks, Matthew Sad Muhammad, the James Scott fight, which we'll talk about. And he fought these guys multiple times, like Matthew Sad Muhammad, Victor Galendez, a couple of fights like with him that I wanted you to talk about. Even John Connor is a guy that I was surprised that he came up short against. No disrespect to John, but Yaqui Lopez, considering the fights that he was in and the wars he was in, you would think that he would have got by him. Even a guy that turned out to be a world champion in St. Gordon coming up short. It just seemed Carlos De Leon, another guy coming up short. Names in the boxing world that were champions, and he just seemed to not be able to beat those guys. Why? What do you think the reason was?
I think they were just a little bit better. I think that's it just speaks to the time. And the fact was that Yaqui Lopez was a guy who was a top 10 light heavyweight. And he was, as of like 1974, is when the Ring magazine started ranking him, and a lot of writers started thinking that Andy Kendall fight was a significant one. The Al Bolden one at the end of his win over Al Bolden at the end of '73. I think that's the one. That was the one that there's an article. I'll put it on social media for the show that Austin Killeen did with him not too long ago. Evidently, I think it was a 2011 interview. And he mentions that fight, one of those fights with Al Bolden, had like 6 knockdowns in it. So, and then soon after one of those bouts, the last fight with Bolden, he fights Kendall, and I think that win he mentions in the Killeen article was a significant one. And if you think about it, he's in the top 10 light heavyweights for half a decade, and who are the other names? Victor Galendez, right. Matthew Saad Muhammad, Michael Spinks. So I think that's what was unfortunate, was that he was probably the number 5 guy, the number 4 guy. So when you come up against some of the better ones, they beat him. But those fights with Conte, that fight was close, and that was in Copenhagen. Those 2 fights with Galendez, both were close and controversial. And then he lost another title fight to this guy I don't know much about.
St. Gordon?
Is his does he have an alias? Because the other name I got was Camion. Lawrence Lido de Camion from Argentina.
Oh no, St. Gordon, that was his name, St. Gordon. He had eventually won a world title, but Yaqui Lopez lost for the NABF title against him. But the John Conta fight in Denmark, most people said that he won that fight, that it was a blatant robbery in that one. But the Victor Galendez fights, those were very entertaining fights.
Yeah, those were good fights, and that's the thing about it, is that he always brought it. I mean, he was an absolute action fighter. He got right in your face and got to work, and I think he was, so a fighter like that is TV friendly. That Mike Rossman fight is an awesome bout, and that actually has it was a New York fight, it was not New Jersey, but there was a strange referee goings on in that fight. That would have been very likely a full-fledged knockout for Yaqui Lopez, but the referee in that fight, a guy named Petey Della, actually gave in one of an article in the New York Times, they called it a standing knockdown, but it really basically it's a standing 8 count. But it was weird because the ref started to hesitate, like it looked like he might stop it. And then he backed off, and then he stepped in again. And, I mean, Lopez is just hammering Rossman. in the sixth round of a fight that had been back and forth, a real good action bout. And the ref comes in again and gives him an 8 count, and then lets the fight continue, and the round ends. Lopez, then the corner of Rossman, his trainer was his dad, said that's enough, and the bout ends up as a TKO. But later, the New York, one of the people that they talked to, the writer talked to, the Times writer, said that it was considered a standing knockdown, which I'd never heard that term before. But when Austin Killeen talks about that fight, he refers to it as a standing 8 count as well. I mean, when you watch it, it looks like a standing 8 count, but for some reason they were calling it a standing knockdown. That something in the rules of the state of New York permitted such a thing.
Those New
very
Yorkers.
odd.
Oh, those
Very
New
odd.
Yorkers. But, he goes the distance a lot. I mean, out of 15 losses, he was only stopped 6 times, and that was mostly on cuts, right? Was he ever knocked out?
I don't know. The De Leon fight is that's on YouTube, and that he stopped on a horrible cut. And that fight, I guess there was only a couple rounds had gone by. It was only a 4-rounder, but into the 4th when they stopped it. But you could say that he was not the same guy after the loss to Michael Spinks.
Well, I just glanced over, not to interrupt you just real quick, I just glanced over his box rec, and he was never knocked out. I mean, the knockouts were TKOs, and most of them were stopped on cuts.
And he was definitely, when he cut, he would definitely, he could bleed quite a bit.
Well, he got the 1980 Fight of the Year from Ring Magazine with his fight against Matthew Sad Muhammad, which, when you talk about this guy, what got us started on Yaqui Lopez, you and I were talking, I believe, and we were wondering if he was in the Hall of Fame. We were shocked that he wasn't, right? I mean, what does he got to do to get in?
Yeah, I think that this is, I don't know if he was on the ballot. He's somebody who, in a year like this year, he probably would have gotten in. I would think. I mean, he always lost when he was in the big one. So,
could that be it? I know we've talked about that. Like they look at, we've talked about this about Marlon Starling.
Knock on a guy.
Yeah, we talk about like Marlon Starling and why he's not in, and then you say, well, some of the guys he beat aren't in. You got, if they get in, then it's easier. And then when you look at Yaqui Lopez, the guy that of those big names that he fought, he came up short against them. But I don't know. I mean, he was at that transition time.
Yeah, I mean, I guess record against other Hall of Famers is one of the big, significant credential.
But fighting how many? But don't you get any credit for fighting as many Hall of Famers as he has?
That at some point, everything is negotiable, or you can argue because that's the nature of it.
And going the distance with
those
these
are
guys.
both pluses.
Yeah,
definitely. And not only that, but in that Matthew Saad Muhammad bout, the first one was not a thriller. The first one was more tactical. And Matthew Saad Muhammad, I think at the time, actually, in that first one, his name was still Matthew Franklin. It was after that bout that he changed his name, I believe. But so he lost in that one, and then when they had the rematch, he had lost to James Scott in Rawway a couple of fights before that, but that Scott fight was on national TV. It's on YouTube. I'll post the link for that too. It's Marv Albert, that was a good fight. So I'm sure he got himself back into the title picture, and the fight with Matthew Saad Muhammad, even though a lot of people, what they were writing at the time were his best days were behind him, or starting to look like they were in the rearview mirror, he had gotten to really good shape for that fight and was leading the fight. He was ahead going into the 8th round. The 8th round is amazing. It's back and forth. There's knockdowns, and that was the 1980 round of the year for the Ring magazine, and that was also the fight of the year. Matthew Saad Muhammad drops Lopez, and I believe that's what it is. Wait a minute, I lost track of who got knocked down. But yeah, that was the round of the year. That fight is a stunner, and that is available on YouTube. It's absolutely brutal. And again, these guys are 175, because when you think about it, I don't know, the Hagler-Hearns is such a spectacular fight, and there's in middleweight you have that balance of speed and power. It's more power when you think about it, because they're bigger men, and oh man, it shows. I mean, when you watch that fight, it's freaky.
This division had so much history. It's a shame that it's not as popular. Hopefully, we can get it back to the way it was. You start adding other divisions like super middleweight division, and it kind of pulls from that pool. But
and remember, that Matthew Saad Muhammad fight. When we did the blast from the past about him, the thing that is amazing about him is he was like a Gotti, but a 175-pound Gotti.
Right.
And not only that, but he was like the best in the world, whereas Gotti was, more of a regional type success, and had those special circumstances fights with Mickey Ward and stuff. I mean, he wasn't the world champion like Matthew Saad Muhammad. I mean, he was all badass. And that Yaqui Lopez fight, that second one, man, it's crazy.
Well,
and the Michael Spinks fight, Michael Spinks has to fight the first couple of rounds. Yaqui Lopez does pretty well, and then Spinks turns it on. And back then, I mean, Spinks, don't think of the guy that got crushed by Mike Tyson. That Michael Spinks was, he was a force. He just rains punches on Yaqui Lopez, combos, and he puts him out in that fight. Well,
and FYI, that was Michael Spinks' 14th pro fight. I mean, that's how good he was, at light heavyweight, So, everybody thinks of him heavyweight, but he was light heavyweight. And then the cruiserweight division was just pretty much born right around Yaqui Lopez's time, because he was fighting light heavyweight, till he moved up a little bit. And I believe St. Gordon might have been the first cruiserweight fight he fought in 1981, and ultimately losing a shot at the World Cruiserweight title against Carlos De Leon. But one thing I like about Yaqui Lopez is the fact that he's still in the business. And this was something that I always say about the sport. It was a trade back then, and people went through this whole sequence. They became an amateur, they became a pro, and then they stayed in the business somehow. And Yaqui Lopez, at 64 years old, is still in the business. He owns a gym, and I've never seen him in the corner or anything, but I know he's in the gym. It's called Yaqui Lopez's Fat City Boxing Gym. So I like to see stuff like that, that the guys are still in it.
Yeah, it's true, and he definitely seems. The Killeen article goes into that, and I actually saw a YouTube interview with him that's done recently. He gives back to the community. Not only that, like I mentioned, that he was just a dedicated guy in terms of his career and very loyal. He had the same. His father-in-law was in charge of his entire career. He never changed trainers, none of that kind of stuff, or dumping cornermen. He actually, there were some real sad. He adopted his grandchild because her parents were, I guess, addicted to methamphetamine. Apparently now, I guess they might be doing. They were doing better as of the article, the Killeen article. And that's always a hard thing to to get rid of addiction like that. That's for sure. But that's how good of a guy that he was as a grandfather. Him and his wife adopted their grandchild, who then the kid actually, the little baby, turned out to have cerebral palsy. So that baby requires a lot of care. It just sounds like a really a giant heart for a guy like this. And that's something that says, those qualities you don't get Hall of Fame votes for. But clearly, this guy, not only was he a fan favorite in the ring, but he just seems like a really just an all-around good human being.
Yeah.
And that's what really counts.
That's what I was just gonna say, a good human being. Hey, listen, I got to take a break, so let me just pause for a minute. When we come back, you can give us the Title Bout Championship outcomes and any other final thoughts you have on Yaqui Lopez. Okay.
Okay.
We'll be back in 2.
Talking Boxing with Billy C. Every week, 2 hours of the best boxing talk on the radio.
I have a bunch of questions, Donnell, right? If you feel like you want to, you can answer for JD first. Why will you win? JD Chapman, why will you win?
Baby Holmes will get sick and get hit by a train that day on the way to the fight, or he might have diarrhea, he might have the flu, he might throw up. One of his eyeballs might fall out that day, and I might get lucky.
Talking Boxing
with Billy C. If you want your voice heard on Talkin' Boxing with Billy C., then call our hotline at 845-228-8710. Leave a voicemail, or you could just tell Billy C. that you like his mustache.
Should I ask you your opinion about this idea?
I'm just trying to give you the encouragement.
Listen, all I need from you is to make sure you don't hang up on people.
And if we like your call, we'll play it back on the air.
You have the knowledge and wisdom of boxing because of what you do and how well you do it.
Leave your name, hometown, and what you think of the show. 845-228-8710. We want to hear you.
Hey, fight fans, check out KOFantasyBoxing.com. KO Fantasy Boxing is boxing's only trademarked fantasy game. Check it out, www.KOFantasyBoxing.com. Select your own gym, your own fighters, track them through a season that can last from 3 months to a year, depending upon which league you join. You got to check this out, man. www.KOFantasyBoxing.com. Join it today. Again, www.KOFantasyBoxing.com. And tell them Billy C sent ya.
Broadcasting in all corners of the globe, on the web and radio.
He would scoff at a stretcher, that man, I would think.
Palla tagliata, messa fuori, c'è Pirlo.
You're listening to Talkin' Boxing with Billy C. From upstate New York and the good old US of A.
Boxing is here to stay because we are here to stay.
The best 2 hours of boxing talk on the airwaves.
Now back to Talkin' Boxing with Billy C. He may not have an Excellence in Broadcasting award, but the night's still young.
And he's got martinis.
So you never know what may be by morning. It's Talkin' Boxing with Billy C.
Talkin' Boxing with Billy C.
Now back to Talkin' Boxing with Billy C.
And we're back. You're listening to the Talking Boxing with Billy C show. Give a shout out to our ESPN New Hampshire listeners. Glad you guys could join us. And speaking of joining, I'm still here with my man, Alex Pierpaoli, and we're talking about former multi-time world title challenger, Yaqui Lopez. And Alex, did you have any final thoughts? Just before we went to break, you were pointing out some of the humanitarian qualities of Yaqui Lopez and some of the things he did. Was there any other final thoughts you had on him before you give us the title bout championship game results?
Well, 2 things. One, unfortunately, I completely forgot to run them. I know it. It's actually, I'm running him versus Sergey Kovalev right now. I started it while we were in the commercial break.
Well, I reminded you that we were going to do that?
Right, yeah. But it completely slipped my mind. I can't believe it.
You're the one that started doing those.
I know. That says something about my mind.
Hey, you should try. You should try brainhealthforever.com. Check that out, man.
I know. I needed some.
That helps you. That helps you. But hey,
But
by
no,
the way,
I mean, as kind and gentle of a man that I'm sure he is, I really want. I can't stress enough that the listeners go out there and watch him nearly destroy Matthew Saad Muhammad. That round 8 of their rematch is just an amazing fight, amazing round. Matthew Saad Muhammad is actually not knocked down, but he takes something like almost 20, I think it is 20 unanswered punches. It's amazing, and that's probably why Yaqui Lopez didn't win that fight. If that fight was if not for Muhammad's amazing constitution and chin, he would have been a champion that night. But he basically punched himself out.
Yeah,
that's you know, and that was it. There was just nothing you couldn't recover from that. It's amazing that Muhammad recovers. He couldn't from all the energy he expended.
Alex always runs when we talk about the Title Bout Championship computer game, in case you don't know, you can check it out on our website, www.billycboxing.com. There's a banner on the left-hand side. The Title Bout Championship computer game is it's a game. It's not video-oriented, although it does show some video, but it's a simulation game where you can put fighters of any era against each other, and there's some parameters you could put in. Are they overweight? Are they underweight? Are they fighting in a different weight? Are they in great shape? Who their trainers are, et cetera, et cetera. And Alex usually puts them in with our rankings, our top rankings. And did you get one that was finished with Sergey Kovalev or no?
It's going right now. It's even into round 7. Alvaro Lopez scored a knockdown in the first round.
Wow.
It's even right now. Lopez, surprisingly, is cut.
Well, while you're finishing up that, because I got some stuff to do, but Yaqui Lopez, like I mentioned, former 5-time world title challenger. He had a career record of 61 wins, 39 coming by knockout, 15 losses in which he was stopped 6 times. Never knocked out. He was technical KOs, most of the time on cuts or, like Alex alluded to, tiring himself out. He fought for 12 years. He had 577 rounds with over a 51% knockout ratio. And Yaqui Lopez was our blast from the past this week. And Alex was, you probably got the results.
Alvaro Lopez, he never won a world title in life, but he just won it in the Title Bout Championship boxing game. He scored a knockout in round number 10 at 2:51 of the 10th over Sergey Kovalev.
Amazing stuff when you consider the way we all look at Sergey Kovalev today, dominating the light heavyweight division, and I think that backs up clearly what Alex and I were talking about during this blast from the past about the era in which Yaqui Lopez fought and the guys he fought. Yeah, he came up short 5 times for world championships, but they were arguably against all the best, all Hall of Famers, So Yaqui Lopez.
And, I would say that we have a modern corollary in a way. I think Fernando Vargas is in a similar situation right now, in that he lost those big fights, but he was one of the top guys. But it just shows you the proliferation of titles. I have no doubt that if Yaqui Lopez fought today, he would have picked up a trinket.
Of course.
He would,
most
he would have had a
fighters
title. I think Fernando Vargas is a very similar corollary to a Yaqui Lopez.
Most fighters that fought yesteryear, especially, we talked about it with the so-called Bums of the Month Club with Joe Louis. At least 80% of those guys would be champions today, and they called them bums back then. But let's wrap this up. Yaqui Lopez.
I'll run the rest of the Sims and I'll post them in social media.
Sounds good. Yaqui Lopez, our blast from the past, and you could always catch these up on BillyCBoxing.com under the blast from the past section. So great job as usual, Alex. And